Hey guys, this is Alessio Summerfield, the host of Metal Gear Mondays, and you are listening to a backlog episode of Metal Gear Monday. So if you guys hear any mention of Geek Time, the Geek Time network is since defunct, and now Metal Gear Mondays is a part of the original lineup of podcast shows from Forever and Astronaut. If you guys want to take advantage of our Patreon to get really cool exclusive content and speak with other fans, as well as talk directly to the hosts and the guests, you can go to patreon.com/foreveranastronaut. $5 a month on Patreon will get you access to all of our original shows, including Dev Diary Season 1 and future shows. So if you want to support the studio and support content like what you're listening to, please be sure to go to patreon.com/foreveranastronaut or foreveranastronaut.com to check out the rest of our lineup of shows, as well as short films, blog posts, and other goodies. If you want to write into the show, the new write-in information is contact@foreveranastronaut.com, or you can utilize the facebook.com/Metal Gear Mondays. Thank you guys so much, and enjoy the episode. Welcome to another episode of Metal Gear Mondays. As always, I'm your host, Alessio Summerfield, and this week I am joined by Samuel Wright.
They don't want none.
And Isaac Lim.
Waza.
And this is
Waza.
okay.
Booyakasha.
And this is the podcast where we talk about Metal Gear Solid games, all of them, as a group of people. Isaac's never played, and me and Sam have played all of them. So here we go.
This is pretty soon here. That's gonna be a lie.
That's true. Yeah, pretty soon Isaac will probably surpass us.
Oh yeah.
No, I mean, well, this entire time. So, Alessio and me are the series vets. We play the Metal Gear games. We have experience with them, but I've never played Peace Walker, or a couple of the other smaller games that we're gonna be getting into.
It's true. So, actually, I just realized this. Welcome to Metal Gear Mondays, otherwise known as the S3 plan, where we just make sure that Isaac Lim becomes Solid Snake. We're exposing Isaac to all of the Metal Gear games so that he can be one of us.
How am I doing so far?
You're doing pretty good, man.
Oh man.
But yeah, so for those of you that are listening in for the very first time, what the fuck are you doing, man? Start back at the beginning of the season. This is the wrap-up thoughts for Metal Gear Solid 2. But if you listened last week, you will know that we have expunged Metal Gear Solid 2 for all of the plot. But what the hell are we talking about today? Sam, what are we talking about?
Subplot.
What?
Subplot.
Okay.
Subtext.
Subtext. So we're talking
Subterranean delivery systems.
Yes. So we're talking just some kind of wrap up thoughts on the plot. We're talking intentionality that we think maybe was kind of put into the game. We're talking development intention, and we're talking fan theories. Spoiler alert, and we're probably going to read some of these emails moving forward, but spoiler alert, some of you guys were telling us that we didn't go too in-depth with the meta-contextual kind of analysis of the series. Well, guess what? This episode's just for you.
So you can skip all the other ones.
Yeah, so just listen to the end of every season. No, and I mean, to kind of address a little bit of that, for the most part, we kind of want to chart through the games as we play them. That way we can kind of give you guys sort of a like on the field kind of immediate gut reaction where it's like, here's the thing, it happened, how do I feel about it?
Yeah. And I think that was
The answer's usually
original.
bad.
That was the original intent, I believe.
Yeah, so the original intention is to just kind of play through all the games and like let people kind of vicariously play the game through the podcast, but also kind of catch people up to speed on like lore and like mythos and like story stuff.
Did you just say mythos?
Yeah.
Is that how that word's pronounced?
That's how
Isn't
I
it
pronounce
mythos?
it. I don't know.
You
I
hipster.
say mythos, but you know, it's just
But yeah, so but yeah, that was kind of the original intentionality, and I'm down to talk kind of meta-contextual stuff, but I don't want that to crowd out the main episodes, and then next thing you know, we have like 2.5 hour, 3 hour episodes every week. And that's just too much. Like, it's too much for us. It's too much for you. Like, by the time you get done listening to that, you're gonna have like heard triple the runtime of the game. So we're just gonna start kind of filing those away in little side pockets, like this episode. But yeah, to kind of get us kick-started, internally we kind of talked about going and looking at fan theories and looking at kind of analyses all over the internet, or even just kind of sharing stories amongst each other.
Stop saying words weird. What is analyses? I'm sorry. it's bothering me.
Analyses is the plural of analysis.
Is it?
Yeah.
I'll have to agree with Alessio here.
I don't believe any of this shit.
And so yeah, we just kind of scoured it all over the internet and found a bunch of cool stuff. I'm actually kind of interested. So, is there anything from the mainline episodes concerning Metal Gear Solid 2's plot that you feel you didn't get a chance to address, or that, like, in retrospect, you kind of have a different opinion or anything like that? Sam, how do you feel?
Yes. I feel like we got pretty down deep into it. I think the goal going into this season was to do it better than season 1, because we kind of skimmed over a lot of plot details and kind of didn't go into stuff as in depth as we should have, because we were trying to cram the whole game into like 4 episodes. But because we weren't as concerned about speeding through it, we got to talk about it a lot more, and I'm a lot more satisfied with how this season turned out.
Nice. Do we have any big gaping plot holes that you feel like we didn't address, or anything that you think needs a little bit more attention?
Not that I can think of, but I'm also dumb.
Well, and sort of complete transparency, Sam actually is going through a mouth crisis and has some problems.
Please don't. Why do you have to say it like that? Mouth crisis. Get the fuck out of here.
Sam's got a bad tooth problem, so please lend him your patience as he struggles with it.
I gotta get a root canal here in a couple of days, and I'm on drugs. So I am actually the
cool stoner.
the cool stoner one right now. So thanks for that.
Oh yeah, I believe that is accredited to Nick Reed. Is that right?
Yes, Nick Reed. Thank you, Nick, for that particular thing. Maybe like he's telling prophecies. And like you guys are gonna evolve into your characters that he's transferred upon you.
I'm gonna press B on that one, Sam.
Okay.
Isaac, did you find any like fan theories or any sort of analysis on the internet that you want to bring to the table before I guide us along my notes?
Well, I think that whatever I have is probably in your notes. So.
And for,
I mean, I will say just the game being like just that, a game, you know, it wasn't real, was kind of mind numbing to me. It was just kind of like, what is going on, you know? And then I read all these little theories and kind of in-depth analyses of this analyses of this theory, and it just kind of it opened it up more and more, and it was kind of crazy. But I mean, we can get into that. But that was pretty much the biggest one for me.
Yeah, man. No, it's so I remember when I first played Metal Gear Solid 2, I remember just kind of playing through it and being like, okay, well, that was what it was, and that's really weird. Granted, at the time, I think this was like, 2001? It was like 15 years ago. So, like 14, 15 years ago. So I was like way younger, and I was just like, okay, that is what it was, no big deal. And then I remember like a couple years later, or maybe even like just 2 years later, I was online doing some reading or whatever, and I saw that somebody had written their college dissertation, or I think it was like their doctorate thesis paper on like postmodernism and Metal Gear Solid 2. And there was a link to like download their paper, and I was like, what the fuck? Like, how is this game that intense that somebody could write like literally at least 100 pages about this game. And so I downloaded it, and definitely at the time, like I think still being in like middle school or high school, I was like, this is super academia focused, and I have no idea what these words mean, but I'm just gonna keep reading it. And so I remember there were a lot of things that I was like, what the fuck is, like, there was like a lot of mention of like political zeitgeist, and a lot of mention of like sort of like meta contextualism, and sort of like postmodernist kind of game development practice, where it was like turning the focus on the player instead of on the game, and a lot of these things where I was just like, I don't think I comprehend what I'm reading right now. So I remember I just kind of put it away for a while. Always knew that was a thing that somebody had done, and then I want to say it was like mid 2000s, maybe like 2006, 2007, that I kind of replayed the game with a different kind of eye, I guess. And it's weird, like once you kind of, it's almost like you can't unsee it. Like once you hear somebody talk about it, which is a big reason why I was like super prizing Isaac's innocent sort of first take on it. I was like, I don't want to spoil this game. I don't want to say anything to him that's gonna like make him think something. So unlike 1, where I did kind of every once in a while text you some stuff where I was like, make sure you do this.
Yeah.
I didn't want to fuck with you playing 2, because it's one of those weird kind of eye-opening moments where it's like, I don't know, it'd be like if you stuck your face in a television set. Like, say you spent your whole life with your like face right up against a TV screen, and then it's like you pull your face away and you're like, oh my god, I'm in a room? Like, what? Like, I don't understand. It's like one of those kind of things where it's just, it kind of changes like a lot of the meaning of things in the game.
Yeah.
And I think I did when I played through it. It didn't hit me at first, like when he was going through the virus was taking over, and you kind of finally understood that, hey, this is a simulation. It didn't hit me at first. I was like, this is really weird. And I read up on it, and I was like, why is this happening? And then it finally just hit me. I don't know when, but it just hit me, and it was the biggest mind blown that I've ever experienced. I was like, golly.
It's just so weird, because the first one is crazy. The first one is a lot more direct in how it presents its story, and this one it's very important to be able to find your own meaning and experience out of it. So
It's just weird to me too that, like, to be completely honest, so I remember, so this is I think this figure is pre Metal Gear Solid 5. But I think Metal Gear Solid 2 is like the highest grossing game in the entire franchise. And so it's nuts to me that like this team that like willingly put together the first game, knowing damn well like what they kind of wanted to do moving forward with the second game based on how the first game did. It's weird to me that it was like that Konami, which is especially in today's Konami, it's weird to me that Konami's like, okay, so you're gonna like literally fucking blow everybody's minds with this, and like they may hate it horribly, and like it might be a total like money flush for us. Right on. Like, where do we cut the check? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and so it's weird to me that like this is the same Konami that we're talking about today, who is like, we're not going to make any more video games anymore. We're going to make pachinko machines because it makes more money.
Gosh.
So it's, I don't know, it's just a completely different
well, is it the same
landscape.
Konami though?
Well, technically it's not the same president, but it's in theory it's the same company, right?
I mean, in theory, leadership changes, focus changes, and I guess it's just
It kind of trickles
know.
down.
Yeah.
it happens with all kinds of companies, you know.
That's true. But yeah, I don't know. Metal Gear Solid 2 is and I kind of hinted at this a little bit last week, or 2 weeks ago, and some of the other past episodes. But I will say, so if Metal Gear Solid 1 was written by a couple of people, and if it was directed by Hideo Kojima and kind of was supposed to kind of be like Metal Gear 2, but for like a new audience in like a 3D version, I feel like Metal Gear Solid 2 it's almost like single-handedly like one person's vision carried out by a team of people. Because I feel like a group of people could not come up with a plot like this without like years of disagreements, and it probably wouldn't have ended up being what it was.
Yeah.
It's just such a weird game, and it's so weird that it like, I don't know. You see weird games like this today in like the indie market, but you don't see weird games like this in the AAA world.
Right.
And I almost think that like it's never gonna happen, like all that much, because they don't want to spend a whole bunch of money on a risk. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it was like, it almost was similar to like a Spielberg effect, where he did the first 3 Star Wars, and everybody was like, "Oh man, this is awesome!" But they all collaborated, and then
Oh, that's true.
when he went to make the prequels, everybody was like, "Oh, this is the god," or whatever. He let him do whatever his vision is, and everybody was scared of him to kind of contribute, and that's what happened with Star Wars prequels. But
Yeah.
the opposite happened with Metal Gear, because it's Kojima,
Yeah.
and so I feel like, I mean, I don't know if that's what happened, but I don't know. I mean, to your effect, this is one man's vision versus a collaboration from Metal Gear Solid 1.
Yeah, it's so, I don't know. So, and I feel like we're talking about it a lot without actually talking about it. But so for everybody at home, obviously, like if you guys have listened to this point, we're done with Metal Gear Solid 2. We've played through all of it, but essentially, in essence, what we're trying to talk about here is kind of what's happening behind the scenes. So, like, yes, on paper, Metal Gear Solid 2 is, straightforwardly speaking, Solid Snake starts out doing some reconnaissance work on an oil tanker. The oil tanker capsizes. Craziness ensues. 2 years later, a new operative gets sent in, does essentially what feels very reminiscent to the original Metal Gear Solid. And then at the end of the game, he's defeated the big bad, and everything is good. However, I don't know. So there are a lot of different theories. Kojima himself has actually been. So there's. I do want to touch on this. So the game is very strategically built to be very reminiscent of Metal Gear Solid 1 intentionally, and it's Metal Gear Solid 2, and this is across the board confirmed. Like, this isn't speculation. What isn't speculation is that Metal Gear Solid 2 is a commentary on not only Metal Gear, but like what games are, and like what the player to game interaction can be, and like what it is. And so that's not up for speculation. Like, that the game almost tells you itself by the end of it. But I think what the important step here, and the step that I want to kind of harp on a little bit, is that yes, literally, like AI Colonel Campbell tells Raiden this is a simulation, like you're just a pawn in the game, you've got to play your role, blah 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 blah. However, what me, Alessio Summerfield, is telling you is that Colonel Campbell's not talking to Raiden. Like, he's talking to you, like the player. And what we're talking about is that, like, it's not mind-blowing that, like, it's not mind-blowing that the plant was a simulation of Shadow Moses. It's mind-blowing that the simulation is Metal Gear Solid 2. And the person who's being taken on for a pawn is us playing the game. And so,
which is kind of explains why Raiden doesn't react when Colonel's going crazy in the codec calls.
Exactly. And in a lot of ways too, like at the end, so this gets talked about a lot, and I really want to preface this before we move forward and talk about Metal Gear Solid 3, but at the end of the game, when Solid Snake says to Raiden, like, you need to, like, whatever you do, make sure you do something that you're proud of, or make sure you do something that you can sort of leave behind like a legacy, because at the end of the day, what we leave behind is something for future generations to then pick up and build off of. And so if the main thesis of Metal Gear Solid 1 was this idea of genes and like gene therapy and what we pass on through genes and what we pass on through our sort of hereditary traits, Metal Gear Solid 2's entire thesis is memes, and memes being what we pass on through information, through what we pass on through knowledge, through what we pass on through sort of records. And in a lot of ways, like, and Hideo Kojima has confirmed this in interviews, Solid Snake is Kojima speaking to the player, and the thing that he's talking about passing on is the information and the mission statement of Metal Gear Solid 2, and trying to pass on that information to the player. And in a lot of ways, he's trying to pass on Metal Gear to a whole new generation so that he could, because again, he wanted this to be his last Metal Gear game. He
Not
wanted,
necessarily the last Metal Gear game, but his last Metal Gear game.
yeah, he wanted it to be his last. So essentially, at the end, he's telling this new generation, "I'm done. Like, this is what I'm leaving for you. Somebody else come take over." And that's why originally Metal Gear Solid 3 actually had a completely different director. It was not supposed to be Kojima. And from here on out, every single time we cover a Metal Gear game, we're all going to get to laugh at the fact that Kojima kept saying this would be his last.
That's the running gag.
Well, and that's what's actually kind of heartbreaking about it, is that it's a running gag, but he still keeps doing them, even though he says he doesn't want to do them. And it's going to kind of make itself very apparent as we continue to play the games in the series, because it's not that the quality degrades, but it's that like the what the stories are about are like almost actively like Kojima versus his audience, or Kojima versus Konami, or Kojima versus expectation. So yeah, and I mean, and it makes sense, because Kojima in this game, as stated again in some behind the scenes documentary stuff, straight up said that he wanted Metal Gear Solid 2. He always envisioned it having a completely different player character, because that went with the whole mission statement of trying to pass things on. So
Yeah.
Solid Snake was never supposed to be the hero of Metal Gear Solid 2. So, I don't know, the whole thing is just kind of a mind fuck. But if you guys, just to kind of, before we dive into the craziness, I wanted to cite a couple of places, that way everybody could go and visit them. And trust me, the show notes for this episode are going to be insane. But if you're looking for some non-Konami kind of blessed resources, Meta Gear Solid, which is META gearsolid.org. If you click their classic site up at the top, and then you click Metal Gear Solid 2, the little image, it has a series of articles that are written on a couple of different theories. One of them is just talking about the legacy of Metal Gear Solid 2 and kind of what Kojima is trying to leave behind. It actually cites a ton of Japanese interviews that have been translated, which is really helpful. The other kind of article series that they have is called the VR theory, which implies that all of Metal Gear Solid 2, within the context of the universe, is actually Raiden experiencing a simulation, not just with the AI, but like literally everything. And then there are a couple other articles which are great. The other thing that I would definitely urge you guys to check out is on YouTube, there's a fellow called Super Bunny Hop, and we had a couple listeners mention his work. I love his stuff. Visit Super Bunny Hop. He does a series called Critical Close-Up, and he tackles Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, and 3, I believe, as their own episodes. And Metal Gear Solid 2 clocks in at a 35-minute YouTube video. So check that out. It's pretty great. Also on YouTube, definitely check out The Reality of Metal Gear Solid 2. It's a really good 15-minute kind of breakdown of the game. My one gripe with The Reality of Metal Gear Solid 2 is that the voice recording is lower than the music volume, so it's actually kind of hard to follow sometimes. And then I'm trying to think of some other resources. Essentially, there was a game that came out called The Document of Metal Gear Solid 2, and I say game in kind of a weird inflection because it's
it's not really a game so much as
A document.
insanity.
yeah, it's like I think it's described on the back of the box as an interactive documentary. It had a super small run. It didn't have like a very high print count. It was kind of like a limited release. But you can get them brand new factory sealed on eBay still for like $40. And that's in the U.S. territories. I don't know about our PAL listeners, but I know the NTSC game usually sells for about $40 on eBay. Essentially, it not only gave you access to the storyboards, the script, and the cutscenes for Metal Gear Solid 2, and you could actually like move the camera around during the cutscenes and like start and stop them and like pause them and kind of fast forward and stuff. But it also allowed you to look at Kojima's original design documents, but they are unfortunately in Japanese, so you'd have to check it online for translations. But it's also
Now,
oh, go ahead.
really quick for the PAL people, it never was released as a standalone in Europe.
Oh, gotcha.
It was released packed into Substance.
Oh, that's amazing.
Because of all the delays that came with releasing it in Europe.
That's awesome.
So unless you can find like a first run version of Metal Gear Solid 2 Substance in PAL, I don't know that you can find it legally.
I think you can find so essentially on top of all the other shit that I just mentioned, it actually also comes with a bunch of behind the scenes documentary video clips. And I know that you can actually YouTube those documentary clips, so I'll try and include them in the show notes as well. The other big resource that we kind of that I kind of took a look at, and I've got them downstairs on my like DVD shelf. Back when spoiler alert, I used to work at a GameStop forever ago. Back when I worked at a GameStop, we I think it was a pre-order bonus for Metal Gear Solid 4. When you pre-ordered Metal Gear Solid 4, you got this DVD called Metal Gear Saga Volume 1, and then when you collected your game, you got Metal Gear Saga Volume 2. And I believe it was Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence, I think, came with these DVDs. And just from GameStop as like a pre-order bonus. But I've got both of them downstairs, and you can actually buy them on Amazon as well now, I think. But I'm also including a YouTube video in the show notes that includes both of them back to back as one video, and it's about an hour long. But it has like 10 to 15 minute interviews with people from the development team for all of the Metal Gear games, which is super neat. But yeah, I feel like I've been talking for fucking forever. Does anybody have any input?
I don't think so. You
Right
covered
on.
it pretty well.
Did you guys watch the? So I sent you guys the clip link for that Reality of Metal Gear Solid 2. Did you guys check it
Yeah,
out?
I watched that the night you sent that to me, and that was very interesting.
Yeah, I dig that guy a lot. I wish he would post more stuff like that. But what did you guys think of it? Did you was there anything that you like agreed with, anything you disagreed with, anything that you were like, I feel like he's kind of grasping at air?
I didn't quite watch it, so
Oh, jeez.
I'm so sorry. Here, let me click it real quick. and I'll-
Isaac, you'd really enjoy it. The music is
No, I
actually,
know.
it's really good. He I don't know how the fuck this YouTube video has not been flagged. He actually uses a bunch of post-punk, so it's like Joy Division and like New Wave and like New Order and stuff.
I actually think I have watched it, but it's been a while because I think you recommended it to me years ago.
Oh, gotcha. Funny fact, I was so ecstatic about this dude like putting into a concise like 15-minute video like what this crazy video game had done, that I actually like sent it to my mom a long time ago. And I was like, I don't just play dumb video games. Check out this video clip. And I remember my mom watching, she's like, that's really crazy. Too bad I have zero context for what any of this is about. So, but yeah, I don't know. Metal Gear Solid 2 is a fucking weird beast, man. So to kind of go a little bit of in-depth into the kind of VR theory stuff, Isaac, you kind of hinted at some of it without thinking that you were.
That's right.
A couple weeks ago, you were like, oh, maybe they lured Raiden into a VR instance before you fought the Rays.
Yeah.
And the VR theory on Metal Gear Solid kind of goes in depth to talk about all of the different aspects of the game. So not only does it cite sort of like the hexagonal shape of the shells and kind of like the DNA like data kind of that is everywhere, but it also talks
It's
about
like they really quick too. They accentuate that throughout the game, and especially in that intro video that I like so much.
oh yeah,
Like that whole thing is like DNA and like the hexagons
yeah.
and like symbolism for that entire thing.
totally. The other thing too is that if you notice during the main menu and stuff like that, and even in the background of some of the textures, like literally every fucking texture in the game has like a weird like hexagon shape to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but on top of all that, the article then goes on to point out things like talking about how kernel, literally in talking about programming, is kernel, like KER, as opposed to COLONIAL. And talking about like kernel and like roots, and talking about
The big
weird-
shell.
yeah, the big shell, again, shell being like a programming sort of
Something.
vocabulary word.
Here's a
So,
voc-
yeah,
here's a vocabulary word.
word for the day, kids. But just it goes really in depth about how like the whole game is kind of inciting these like coding
you're-
metaphors for
or
what
like
it
you're a
is.
computer.
Yeah,
Like the game is a computer program of sorts, in a way.
And the interesting thing too is there's another article going through the special options kind of menu setting stuff where we were talking about like Natasha's retrospective novel that you can read in the game and stuff like that. Just like the different articles and stuff, and talking about how Raiden is a perfect stand-in for the player because Raiden has done all these VR missions, but he's also done VR of Shadow Moses and done VR of the tanker. And so what this article then begins to posit is that the tanker at the beginning of Metal Gear Solid 2 that we play... Oh, I remember what it was. Here's the crazy fucking thing. Okay, this actually blew my mind. So, the demo for Metal Gear Solid 2, the tanker, came out 2 years before Metal Gear Solid 2 actually came out. It came out with Zone of the Enders. Here's the part that makes my hair stand up on my fucking arms. When you play Metal Gear Solid 2, Snake says the Hudson River 2 years ago, which is literally when the demo came out.
Oh God.
And then when you play as Raiden mentions having done the tanker simulation
2
and like
years ago.
2 years ago,
Dang.
which is when we played the tanker simulation.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing is just like so elaborately done. Like it's all so intentional that when people are like, "Oh, Metal Gear Solid 2 is just a mind fuck just for the sake of being a mind fuck," I'm like, no. Like there is so much detail that went into this mind fuck that it's crazy. So and that posits the whole like MGS2 actually being MGS3 kind of thing, was that they were going to be like, "Oh, the demo was Metal Gear Solid 2," and they were just like, I don't know, just MGS2 being MGS3. It was like, what happened to 2? Oh, it was the demo 2 years ago. So I don't know. It's just the whole thing baffles me that like one person was able to kind of spearhead this like batshit crazy game project. But yeah, I don't know. What I'm kind of upset about is that, and I don't want to spoil anything for Isaac, but like to be completely honest, like I'm a little like there's some weird kind of remission that like this doesn't happen again in the series.
Yeah.
Like this is kind of the last time that like, and Kojima is known for mind fucks, but what's weird is that like not until the promotion of Metal Gear Solid 5, where it was all like this weird elaborate ruse and they never announced Metal Gear Solid 5, it was kind of like, oh, it's this weird game from a Swedish indie developer called The Phantom Pain, and like fans had to piece together that it was a Metal Gear game.
It was like Moby Dick Studios or something like that.
Yeah, it was so weird, but like, and we'll go super in depth into that craziness because I was like on the NeoGAF forums like as it was happening and like trying to figure out what the fuck was going on.
Shooting trailers directly into your veins to live.
Yeah, it was. But it's weird because not until MGS5 did the series ever do this like weird meta shit again. And I haven't finished MGS5, so I don't know if it does get crazy by the end of it. I'm hoping it does. I'm hoping that, fingers crossed. Yeah, 'cause spoiler alert for listeners, I'm still like only 60% of the way through MGS5, but it's because I'm trying to literally do as much as I can while I play. But yeah, so I don't know. I'm just like a little bummed out that after 2, and that's why like, and you'll notice in our listener responses next week that some people prefer other games in the series over 2. But that's why for me 2 is always going to stand up as this kind of like wonderful thing, because it's like there's nothing else like it. Like, it's so bizarre.
It wasn't just like gameplay story. It was gameplay story lesson, and then
Lesson
mind
learned.
blown
Yeah.
type thing.
Gameplay story. Seriously, put the fucking game down. Mind blown. Like, I don't know. It's just it's the little things like that make me keep coming back to this game, probably every like year or two, and doing another playthrough, because not only is it chock full of like the fact, I mean, it's not a coincidence that Solidus looks like Big Boss, and I don't think it has anything to do with them trying to recreate like this Solid Snake simulation. I don't think it has anything to do with like Jack being a child soldier. I don't think any of that shit matters, because honestly, even when Jack talks about being a child soldier, who plays these video games? Children. Who are we? We're children that were raised on violent video games. What did we do as like in our childhood? We killed people. What does Jack say that they showed him while he was a child soldier in his like camps? They showed them violent action movies to like get them jazzed up and pumped about killing people. Like, Jack is totally just a fill-in for us as video game players. And I don't know, like, he has no, like, all the criticisms are totally right. Like, Jack has no fucking personality, because Jack is just supposed to be like a mirror for us. You know what I mean?
And I guess to another point for that is that somewhere in the game, he mentions that where is it? That he shot so many people, and then he was actually like the top of his. I don't know. Maybe you guys can chime in. He was like the top.
Well, what he was
member.
like the number one. He was like number one ranked.
Yeah.
That's why he was the leader.
Wasn't he
of
like,
his...
what was he? He was the leader of the small boys unit?
Yeah. So that's pretty much like when you play a video game, you're the lone hero, and you are the one that will save the world, and you destroy all the enemies and kill all these bad guys, and you're the top of your class, I guess you could say.
You just described a leaderboard as
Yeah.
well.
Essentially.
Which ties right back into the whole thing.
And when it's, I mean, again, it's not a coincidence that at the end of the game, Raiden pulls the dog tags off of his body, and it's not his name, it's our name.
Right.
Or whatever, if you put shit balls in your name for the game. But like, and like, yes, that is Raiden casting off. Well, and if you think about it, literally just before then is the last time you control Raiden for the rest of the game. So in a lot of ways, it's Raiden casting off your control of him, and kind of going off and doing his own thing. But in a lot of ways, it's also him acknowledging, like, I am just a player in this game, and like I'm being controlled and manipulated. And what's fucking nuts to me is if you think about it in that terms, like, okay, and I just remembered this. Everybody was always asking who are the Patriots, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before the other games in the series came out, the answer to that question is that we are the Patriots. Because like the developer of the game could even be considered the Patriots, because like we are wanting the game to be a certain way, and like we're demanding that the game meet expectation. And like the argument can be made, and apparently a lot of people have cited where this is the case, that the team that built Metal Gear Solid 1 knew about the success of the game before they started working on Metal Gear Solid 2. So it was made as if like the world, like the expectation for Metal Gear Solid 2, that's the Patriots. Like, that's the information control. Like, we want our games to be a certain way because that's what we expect. And the developers are the people who have to make that game happen. And so the kernel is like a voice for the developers, but in the end, like, the player and our expectations are the Patriots, because we're manipulating based on what we spend money on and what we want, and like consumerism and the fact that we want the product that we want. Like, we are the reason why Metal Gear Solid 2 is an exact replica of Metal Gear Solid 1, because that's all we want. Because Metal Gear Solid 1 was an exact replica of Metal Gear 2. And every fucking Legend of Zelda is an exact replica of The Legend of Zelda. Like, we don't want different. Like, we want familiar. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's weird. Like Metal Gear Solid 2 has so many layers to it that it's like I feel like every time I pick the game back up and talk to somebody about it, like more shit comes up.
It's just such it's such a deep web, I guess. I don't know where I was going
Tunnel.
with that, but like there's a lot to
The World Wide Web.
the deep web. There's a lot to pull
Ooh.
from it though. It's like so philosophical in some ways, and it just kind of like subverts what you expect out of a video game, I guess.
I think for me, what frustrates me the most is that like that is the case, but then simultaneously, like people will play it, and like some people will just never even think about that.
Yeah.
And like to me, like I always think of, and I mean, again, I think this might be Kojima kind of playing victim because at the end of the day, like he's the one who agreed to making more Metal Gears, but like in a lot of ways, I always view Kojima as such like a tragic figure in games because I see him as like the man who made Metal Gear Solid 2, and then I see like what Metal Gear continued to become, and that's not to say like I'm a huge fan of Metal Gear. But this actually came up. I was in the middle of an email conversation with good old TJ, friend of the show, and we were talking about something that we're gonna read on the next episode, where he was just saying like, "Hey, I actually prefer Metal Gear Solid 3 over Metal Gear Solid 2," and I just kind of told him I was like, "Man, realistically, like my love for Metal Gear is eternal, and I love all of them. But the thing is that like to me." I don't give a shit what happens to the characters. I don't really like I do, but like on a surface level. Like it's like you watch a soap opera, like you're not super ultra invested in the soap opera. You're just watching characters that you enjoy doing things that you enjoy. But for me it's like Metal Gear Solid after the second game, like it stops being just about the character drama and like who sleeps with who and whose baby is who, like to me, Metal Gear Solid 2 is super fucking important because it doesn't care about that stuff. It just uses those things to tell you a story and to like pull you into an experience. Mm-hmm. So like Metal Gear Solid 2 could have been Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 if it wanted to be. Like it could tell you that, I mean technically that's what Spec Ops is. Spec Ops The Line is Metal Gear Solid
God.
2 for Gears of War.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know, it's just like Metal Gear uses these familiar. Can you imagine if there was a Metal Gear Solid 2 equivalent for Super Mario Brothers? Like
Braid?
my brain would bleed. Oh, I guess Braid is that. That's actually a good point. But I guess using those Mario characters instead, and Nintendo would never allow for that.
No, God, no, of course not.
Which is crazy that Konami allowed for that.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to the whole thing where I think they were a lot more trusting of Kojima back then and giving him free reign to do whatever the hell he wanted to versus now where all this crazy stuff is happening or has happened.
Has happened, yeah. I feel like for the longest time, like Kojima, and this is a fun story for those of you guys who don't know, some of the listeners who don't know like Metal Gear history, I guess. Whenever Hideo Kojima was working at Konami, he did a couple little things here and there. But they essentially Metal Gear 1 was in development, but the director left in the middle of it, and so they asked Kojima to step up and make this game. And he kind of tweaked some stuff. It was supposed to be like a run and gun, but they couldn't put that many bullets and enemies on screen, which ultimately Konami ended up publishing Contra, so I'm sure Contra ended up being what that was supposed to be. Mm-hmm. But essentially Kojima was like, I like playing hide and seek. If we can't have a bunch of enemies on screen, we should just make this like a hide and seek game. And like thus fucking stealth games in general were born. But then B, after Kojima finished developing Metal Gear 1, he was not asked to develop a sequel. Instead, it did so well in America that Snake's Revenge, which was just for America, was released. And it may have been released elsewhere as well, but Snake's Revenge came out, and one of the guys, I believe from the Snake's Revenge team, said, Kojima, I loved Metal Gear 1 so much. I think he was on a train with Kojima. He was like, I love Metal Gear 1 so much. I really wish you would come back and develop a sequel. And apparently Kojima started writing the sequel on the train, like on paper that he had on him. And he ended up going back and pitching it to Konami, and they're like, yeah, dude, go for it. And like when all this is happening, he's like in his mid-20s.
Oh.
And then it's just like fast forward like 25 years later or whatever, and it's nuts to me that like literally since the beginning of this franchise, he's kind of reluctantly directed the next one. Like he's never been like, I'm just going to direct Metal Gear games for the rest of my life. He just like keeps getting pulled it back in every single time. And it's just, I don't know, it's weird to me that Kojima, this like young, I think he was like 23, 24 when Metal Gear 1 was developed, but just like this young dude who just like on a lark was like, oh yeah, I guess I'll do another one. And he's literally been saying that for like almost 3 decades.
Yep.
But at least he's managed to do some interesting shit with it and not let it stagnate, I guess.
Which has been like the thing, because there's a bunch of developers out there, and I'm struggling to come up with them off the top of my head, but I've read stories about how there are developers who are famous for a series and doing series of games that get so fed up with the idea of doing the series that the series suffers for it. And the one thing you can say about Hideo Kojima is that the series, as far as the story and the message he's trying to deliver, has not suffered. It's been what he wanted to deliver every time.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. He had one job and he fucking did it.
Mhm.
Like he's it's every time I think about that, it reminds me of like the funny like Freddie Mercury meme where it's like fat bottom girls, and it was like Freddie Mercury doesn't even like women, but he had one job and he fucking did it. Like but yeah, I don't know. I'm just kind of reminded that with Kojima, because Kojima his whole life wanted to be a film director, but instead opted into continuing to make these Metal Gear games. So I don't know, dude. The whole thing is nuts. I feel like we have filleted Kojima's ego so much on this episode that I'm almost willing to just like let it sit here and just say, hey, listener, go to every single thing that we have in the links below. But yeah, this is definitely, if you never look at the show notes for any of these episodes, I urge you to look at the show notes for these ones. And please fall down the deep dive that is Metal Gear Solid 2.
Especially if you're one of the people that has like messaged us like wanting more about like the philosophical nature of the game, because this is the one. There's just so much, and there's so much material to look at and read over and just kind of drown yourself in, which is a pretty apt way to put it.
I agree. I mean, I've spent many a long night just like Googling Metal Gear Solid 2. It's weird for how straightforward pretty much every other game in the series is. It's so weird that this one is just like so ridiculously full of information.
And you know, well, on one level it is, but on another level, again, it's the whole thing where it's supposed to be his like goodbye to the series. So, of course it is. You know,
It sucks to me that like what he wanted to be his goodbye to the series was so what is the word? Was just so like groundbreaking. But then whenever he didn't get to like say his goodbye to the series on his own terms, apparently like there was like a whole cut chapter and it wasn't what he wanted it to be. You know what I mean? So, I don't know, because Metal Gear Solid 5 arguably, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more, but Metal Gear Solid 5 arguably did not finish development. So, to me, it's just heartbreaking that the unintended finale for the series is not as big of a hurrah goodbye as this. You know what I mean?
yeah. And again, like we'll get into this a lot later on, but it's just it could have and should have been so much more.
Yeah. Well, word. What are we sitting at on recording time right now?
Do we want to go
cool.
into a little bit of detail for those who don't look at the show notes and won't look at the show notes?
Yeah, I mean, we kind
Until-
of hit at it. We kind of hit on it at the beginning of the episode a little bit. Just, I mean, other than kind of going like hyper in depth with it,
Right.
which is going to be me sitting here like reading you an article, pretty much. sort of each of those articles that we were linking to kind of have their own theses, which is Sam's favorite word right now.
Oh my god.
Let me see.
You can't just pretend things are plural.
I'm sorry.
What if I just invented pluralities?
So I had a. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Isaac.
I had a
Go ahead.
question about like the overarching. I mean, Metal Gear in general.
Mhm.
So I noticed in the game there's a lot of different snakes. Like you got Solid Snake, Liquid Snake, Solidus Snake. I guess that's all in Metal Gear Solid 2, but they all refer to all the characters' names as like the full name, like Liquid Snake, Solidus Snake, except for Solid Snake. They always refer to him as Snake. I don't. Is there a reason for that, or they just wanted to simplify it? You think?
I think they might just read the other snakes' full names out loud just to not confuse them with Solid Snake.
Because to us, Solid Snake is Snake. As a player, he is the main character. He is Snake.
He is Snake.
And to be fair, too, like in the first one and in the second one, like there was that confusion where it's like, this is Snake, but I'm Snake, but he's Snake, but who's Snake? That person's Snake, but not really. This is Snake. Like I think all of it's intentional. But I think when the other ones call him Snake, I think it's to accentuate the fact that that's our Snake. That's the quote real Snake. You know what I mean?
Oh, good point.
He's the canon snake.
Yeah. Okay.
So one of the articles that we're linking to is actually talking about digital Fox Die and Raiden's dual role, and that's also from Meta Gear Solid. And it's written by a guy who goes by Mad Jackal. And essentially, he actually posits a pretty interesting hypothesis that essentially throughout the entire game, Raiden is fulfilling the same kind of role that Snake did in the original Metal Gear Solid, where instead of going around and spreading this like illness, this Fox Die that kills everybody who it's programmed to kill, that Raiden is actually spreading a digital version, in a sense, that destroys all of the data trail for the Patriots everywhere that he goes. But also that every time he logs into the nodes and stuff like that, that what's actually happening is that his perspective of the events and sort of his unreliable narration and his kind of spreading of his own misinformation to the people that he encounters is in a way like a digital virus of him kind of tainting all of the information that he comes across, which I thought was super interesting. Let me see here as well. Yeah, I realized that there are obvious similarities between kind of Fox Die and some of the things that happen through the kind of heart attack with Ames and stuff, but I didn't really realize all that jazz. Let me see. I definitely, if you guys don't want to do a lot of reading, at least look at the show notes, and I'll have them organized between articles and between videos. That way people can look at the videos if they want to. But I would definitely at least watch the videos. Some of them are like 15 minutes, so it's not a huge chunk of your time. And then likewise too, in the sort of there's like a 3-part Legacy of Metal Gear Solid 2 article. The third part is all about allegory and actually breaks down sort of the analysis of the each character in the game's names and like what they do and what they sort of live for, I guess, within the game's canon. But yeah, I don't know. There's just a lot of shit to go into.
There's a lot,
I guess.
yeah.
We could probably, if we went into every piece of information, we're going to be linking in the notes, like, in great detail, what we'd be here for hours.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, one thing I
So-
thought interesting, and this goes back to the you are, Jack is you or whatever. I mean, this is all on the surface level, but Jack is being, in the literal terms, a jack that you plug into the game. But
I
then,
didn't even think about that.
yeah, or you plug into a
Like
computer or something to
Yeah.
play.
You're jacking into the Matrix.
So But then at the same time,
What was that like evil?
anyway, but at the same
Alright.
time, you know how like throughout the whole game, Raiden is getting confused for a girl. Like the president grabs his crotch, whatever, and so my thinking theory is that he's pretty androgynous, so that boy or guys, female and male players feel accepted in this game in the sense that, hey, he can be a guy, or hey, he can be me, I'm a girl, or whatever, you know. So I don't know if that plays in with the whole lore of Metal Gear throughout down the road.
Do you think that's what Kojima meant whenever he said that they made Raiden to be more appealing to female players? Like, not sexually, but like
But
as far as
physically?
like them seeing themselves in the character.
Being able to play, maybe.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
And like all the people that confuse him for a woman throughout the game too.
Yeah, because that's a very, very, very cited thing that happens constantly.
And the president grabs his junk.
Another interesting,
The president needs you, I think.
the other crazy thing too is that just kind of looking through some of the other article stuff, it's interesting to me, but I didn't even. So I'll say one thing and then I'll say the crazy thing. The first thing is during the opening credits that you mentioned, Sam, how it shows all these sort of helixes locking into place or whatever. It's interesting that one of them breaks away from the sort of gene that's being built.
Yeah, and then like turns into a snake. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, and if you beat Metal Gear Solid 1, like, Snake escaped his genetic fate. You know what I mean? So it's interesting. It's interesting. Also, the other thing is that I did not realize this, but this article, I'll just read this quick little paragraph. This is from part 2 of the Legacy of Metal Gear Solid 2. It says, you could even go so far as to say that Sons of Liberty itself is a meme, that it's a set of ideas and information transferred from Kojima's mind to ours. But like all information, we need to filter out unnecessary information, retrievable valuable truths, and interpret them for future generations. That's where the smoke gains substance and where the true challenge of MGS2 lies. So it's interesting to me that in making this game, Kojima is actually creating a set of memes himself. Which is super meta. But
yeah.
that's nuts. So anyway, I don't really know
quick
what else.
before we move on to, I know we touched about this like episodes ago, but I also want to just like throw out how genius it was that intro movie that I love so much was cut in such a way as to hide the fact that Raiden was the main character of the game. Like they spliced in pieces from the plant chapter into the movie and cut Snake into it from several different parts of the tanker and even some parts in the plant chapter. And you didn't really see Raiden until the very end of it, and they kind of focus on him a little bit, but in a way that makes it seem like he's a new character that's going to be important to the story, but not necessarily as important as he was. I love it. I love.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Just like they were keeping the wool over all the way up until you start playing the game.
For sure. But yeah, so like just to kind of head everybody off. So obviously, if you guys have any you can't really have any corrections on what we're talking about because it's all very subjective, and nothing that we're saying is like 100% objectively true. A lot of it is just interpreting different interview answers and kind of, I don't know, at the end of the day, I don't even think it fucking matters what Kojima comes out and says as being officially true, because he hasn't really 100% validated any of the games. Like he very much so always talks about how he just wanted to make it and then put it out there. So it's hard to kind of state any of this as fact, which is why we're kind of covering this as like a fan theory episode. But I think the fact that the author is sanctioning people to come up with their own interpretations means that it's all fair game. So that being said, I just want to definitely throw out there that if you're going to write in and say like, hey, I see what you guys were thinking, but X, Y, and Z, please refrain from responding with, I get what you guys are saying, but what about Metal Gear Solid 4? How could that have happened if it was all fake? Like, understand that Metal Gear Solid 4 was not something that was even conceived
Yeah.
upon development of MGS2, and that Kojima himself has said that they have retconned the living fuck out of Metal Gear Solid 4, or Metal Gear Solid 2 within a Metal Gear Solid 4 to make it happen.
Yeah.
Because even Rose existing is supposed to be, like, up to your interpretation. Like, and the fact that Raiden has nothing in his room, again, posits that he's not an actual fleshed out character. He's just a stick figure for us to play. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. Just to cut everybody off before they're like, wait a minute. Like, these aren't things that are quote unquote canon.
Yeah. They're all just
Because-
theories. We're
Yeah.
operating under the assumption that Metal Gear Solid 2 exists within a bubble as it did when it came out.
Yeah. That, like, nothing has come after it. But
Yeah.
Oh man, just looking through some of these articles, I really wish that we could just like sit on the air and just read an entire article from start to finish.
I mean, nothing's stopping us.
That's true. I will specifically state though, everybody should definitely go check out this VR theory article as well because it's pretty amazing. But yeah, so I think, without further ado, like that's kind of our wrap up. I mean, do you guys have anything that you feel like we have not touched on yet? I kind of feel like, I want to apologize to listeners because I feel like we definitely did not read and memorize these articles enough to where we could kind of cite stuff from memory, or even from notes. So I apologize if you were coming to us as the ultimate experts on all things MGS2 fan theory. But that all being said, like, definitely take some time and look into some of this stuff. Do you guys have any sort of closing wrap up, like if we never talk about MGS2 ever again? Thoughts?
A+ game.
Oh, wow. Sam, you know, oh my gosh, that was exactly what I was thinking. Like, exactly word for word. I was like, I'm going to say it, A+ game. And then
That's weird because
that was so weird.
I thought you guys were both gonna say it, but at the same time, I wonder if this is just all just a byproduct of the fact that you're a part of my simulation.
Jesus Christ.
Just what I think is gonna happen is always gonna happen.
I need scissors. 61.
Oh man. Oh, and I will say too, really quickly, just to get nerdy as fuck again. Whenever they mention that the Colonel was telling Raiden what he wanted to hear because of a mixture of the AI, but also like his subconscious, I feel like that's 100% like crosshairs aimed at us as the player. Because it's like, oh, it's Colonel. Like, Colonel should be giving me orders, not Otacon. And then it's like, oh, what would the Colonel tell me to do? The Colonel would definitely tell me these things. You know what I mean?
Right. Because we're so familiar him being like the guy from the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He's also the guy in Metal Gear 2 as well. But anyway, cool. I will definitely. I think I'm just gonna commit because we keep getting asked the question. I'm just gonna fucking go on record, y'all. Metal Gear Solid 2, I think, is my favorite Metal Gear.
Seconded. A+ game.
I'm just gonna do it.
Well, it's my favorite so far.
So far. Ooh. I liked how you said that with a little seductive tail at the end.
You should
That
see
was
my
like-
eyes.
He says so far as if it's like the end of the credits of Metal Gear Solid 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Metal Gear Solid 2 is my favorite Metal Gear Solid game. So far.
So
I think Metal Gear Solid 2, I think, is my favorite game as a complete package. But I think there are definitely characters and little like side stories that happen as the series progresses that I adore.
Yeah.
So
I really loved
think-
it.
And also, it gave me my single favorite line ever uttered in a video game. The president needs you, I think.
I thought you were gonna say "There's mine's there."
Well, that would be it now. Des mine's there.
Oh
There's
yeah,
gonna be
and
like
also-
there's gonna be like a lot of Russian in Metal Gear Solid 3, and I'm very excited about that.
I'm pretty stoked about that as well. Also, fun pro tip for everybody. Apparently, originally in the design document, Kojima never wanted to reveal the identity of the ninja. Like ever. But I think that would have been going a little too far.
It's probably good that he did.
Well, yeah, right on. Fuck it. I guess this is the part where we wrap the show up. Sam,
Hi.
as the owner of Geek Time.
Oh, God.
I'm not the owner of Geek Time, but as Sam being the owner of Geek Time.
Yes.
Sam, I want to just tell you, I apologize for not taking a mid-show break to plug things.
You dummy.
Would you like to take this time to plug things for me?
I was actually going to mention that, but my mouth hurts and I can't. So
Okay. Would you like me to plug?
no. As far as like remembering to bring it up earlier, but I will happily do it now. You can go on the internet to find us at geekti.me. That is our website. You'll find the rest of this show and all of our other shows there. Really good shows like the Geek Time podcast, which is kind of our Avengers podcast where we all meet up in the middle. We've got Aaron's news show, the Week in Geek.
And I'm going to be on the new episode.
Yeah. By the time you hear this, Alessio's episode will be out, but Aaron has had me, James, and Alessio on the first 3 episodes of his show. And it's a pretty interesting show. He goes kind of beat by beat over some like 4 or 5 of the top news stories of the week, and then goes in depth on one of them with a special guest.
It's very talk radio. I love it.
Yeah, it's like he's very NPR Aaron, which is like fantastic. We've also got May We Have a Word, which is my podcast. I talk about words. I don't know. It's a hard one to explain. It's an anecdotal journey through the forest of language. Is the summary I've come up for it. I essentially sit down and talk to people, and they share stories with me, and we go back and forth about the importance of a specific word. I've had Alessio on to do the word begin. The most recent episode was an episode with a friend of the show, Cheyenne Moore, about the word story. The episode coming out on Wednesday is going to be the word design with a good friend of mine, Ian Baldwin. That's an interesting one. So yeah, check that out. And then another show is the DBZ Drive-Thru, which is James's kind of Dragon Ball retrospective podcast. It's a good listen. So check that out as well.
A listen.
I
Neither
said,
good nor bad.
No, I said a listen, and then I was like, I meant to say good, but I'm so freaking out of it right now. No, he goes into like important moments from Dragon Ball past, and then he also summarizes like what happened in the newest episodes of Dragon Ball Super. And it is a good listen, so check that out.
Isaac, when are you going to have your own podcast?
Yeah.
Starting one next week.
Uh-oh.
So stay tuned.
I've heard nothing about this.
Yep.
Oh, also tomorrow. So you'll be hearing this on Monday, which would be Monday the 1st. Tomorrow, which is Tuesday the 2nd, the first episode of That One Anime Show and Toast is coming out, which is like a mystery science theater audio podcast where instead of movies, it's anime. And I do that with my friend Kevin and special guest Ganon the Cat, recurring character. So definitely check that out if you are inclined.
Right, Dad. And also, be sure to check us out on patreon.com/geektimepod if you want to help donate to the show. Every little contribution helps. Likewise, ratings and reviews on iTunes help the show gain exposure. And also tell a friend. The other thing is that if you are like many and you utilize Amazon, be sure to use our Amazon affiliate link, which is at geekti.me/WP/donate, or just go to geekti.me and click donate and scroll down, and you would use that Amazon link just like you use regular Amazon, except we get a nice little kickback, which helps us do cool things. And likewise, be sure to like us on Facebook, guys, because I'm going to be totally honest. Right now, we've got a fair amount of likes on Facebook. We've got 58 concurrent likes. I want to see that number get to 3 digits, guys. Like, I know
Yeah.
that they're like we know we can track the metrics of this podcast. Like, we know there are more than 58 listeners. So please, let's get that up to like 100 at least, and I'll feel like I will have done my job as a podcast host. There are a lot of good comments, a lot of good feedback from the listeners. I would like to see more people like having discussion on posts, because right now it's a lot of people kind of posting fun stuff that they find, and every once in a while somebody will comment or somebody will leave a like. But I would love it, specifically with this episode, if we could just get some like crazy Metal Gear fan theorizing going on in the comment section. So yeah, let's work on that, guys, and that you can visit that. That's at facebook.com/Metal Gear Mondays. You can hit me up on Twitter if you've got anything you want to tell me at AC Summerfield. Sam, where can they find you?
They can find me at Sam Wright DPS.
And Sam's email, if you ever need to contact him, is samw@geekti.me, not sam@geekti.me.
Everybody associated with Geek Time, their emails are their first name at geekti.me. Mine was generated Sam W, and it upsets me because it's not like there's no consistency involved.
Oh, and likewise, too, so next episode we're going to be covering VR missions, bonus content, and kind of final, ultra final, super turbo, arcade Street Fighter edition final thoughts on Metal Gear Solid 2. And so if you guys have any thoughts on VR missions, Snake Tales, skateboarding, or any of that shit, casting theater, let us know in the contact form on the Facebook page, and that contact form is on our website, and it's geekti.me, and then you can click contact, or I think it's geekti.me/WP/contact. Isaac, where can people find you on the internet?
Hit me up at doesn't have a twit. That's a Twitter account that I do have. So
So just a live.
Are we gonna check Isaac's Twitter every single time
every
that we do this
episode
shit?
to make sure he's done something.
Oh,
let me have a look.
yeah,
let me
stay
have a look at
tuned
this.
next week, guys, when I live tweet, record live tweet my first tweet. My first tweet.
He's gonna live tweet his first tweet.
You heard it here first, guys.
How are you gonna live tweet it next week? Because we're recording it in an hour.
It's magic.
Yeah. He's got more followers now.
Oh,
He's got
really?
4 extra followers.
Oh shit!
Sweet.
Who are they?
Yeah.
Do we have
Keith-
to list them all?
Keith Reynolds, Keith
Alright.
16,
Keith.
and then Thomas Bowen, which is Thomas Bowen 89.
Oh, Thomas Bowen.
Yeah.
He's one of the people on the Facebook page.
Yeah, he's a friend of the show.
That's awesome.
And
He's
then
a
we've
pal.
got Jake Simpson. J Shiz My Niz is his Twitter friend. And then
That's awesome.
And then at House of Jeff, who also does not have any tweets. I'm not sure who this is. But those are Isaac's 4 new Twitter followers.
We're interchangeable. It's fine.
It's fine. So that's what's happening there.
Sweet. Cool.
Into it. Well, rad dad. So I think it's our show. Yeah. So I said what we're covering next week, or not next week, but next mainline episode. So 2 weeks after the MGS2 wrap-up stuff, we're actually going to be finally covering a new Metal Gear game. We're going to be covering Metal Gear Acid 1. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna do Metal Gear Acid 1 and Metal Gear Acid 2 as both back-to-back kind of recap episodes. We're not gonna break it up into like a million episodes like we did with this one. We're just gonna kind of touch on a little bit about what it is, what it does, what's cool. Sam and Isaac might be there asking me questions, maybe not. And then we're going to do Metal Gear Acid 1 and 2, but then we're going to do, those are each episode, so Metal Gear Acid 1 is an episode, and then Metal Gear Acid 2 is an episode, and then we're going to do Metal Gear Acid 1 and 2 listener responses. So you've got a little bit of time. I believe you've got like a month to get your Metal Gear Acid suggestions into us. But yeah, go ahead and send that stuff if you got it. If you played Acid, let us know. If you're all 12 people that played Metal Gear Acid.
If you
let us
do
know.
Acid, let us know.
Yeah, if you do Acid and you play Metal Gear, that's kind of the same thing. But yeah, that's it, guys. It's been a great podcast. I really appreciate it. I'm so fucking ready to move on to another game. Yeah, Sam, what shouldn't they forget?
Why'd you have to go to me?
Because I always go to Isaac.
Yeah.
Well, they really just shouldn't forget to be kind to people. Live your life in such a way that reflects upon your desire to leave the world a better place.
Oh, I think I might be able to jump on in with some what you're spitting right now too. Actually,
Yeah, spit that sugar, spit that sweet sugar.
Why do you hate me for saying that so much?
I don't hate you for saying that.
All right, so I've got a cool little sign off. Life isn't just about passing on your genes. We can leave behind much more than just DNA. Through speech, music, literature, and movies, what we've seen, heard, felt, anger, joy, and sorrow, these are the things I will pass on. That's what I live for. And that's solid motherfucking snake, y'all.
You know what I'm going to pass on
What?
to my future generations?
What are you passing on?
It's just a box.
Just a box.
It's what? What is it?
It's just a box.
Did
I
you
like how
say
TJ
nerd?
sent us I like how TJ sent us a picture of the cardboard moving boxes at his house.
Yeah.
On Facebook. All right, I'm cutting.
Yeah, me too.
All right.